Through the papers, once again joined by the broadcaster and journalist Badisha and the writer Matthew Stadlin. Lovely to see you again, guys. And to the front of the Daily Mail, Badisha, the Prime Minister saying that working from home doesn't work. Presumably he made this statement from his home, which is also his place of work.
Presumably he did. Now, for those who've forgotten because they haven't seen him very much recently, that is Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister. He's given a very wide-ranging interview to the Daily Mail where he claims that it's time for everyone to get back into the office. And he's saying that working from home doesn't work. I don't think he believes that, and I also don't think it's particularly true. I think his deeper point is something he says a bit further on in the interview, which is that he has a desire to revive town centres and city centres because of all the local businesses who are losing out, the sandwich shops, those little services that you need, even the local pharmacies that you drop into in your lunch hour if you're working in an office. They're being bled of their usual custom, and he says that he wants to see mass transport up and running again in the sense of lots of people buying tickets. I do completely understand that. It's his way of trying to mitigate all of the other economic issues that we all know and have been on the front pages for the last few months, really. The fuel prices, the food prices, the stockage, the shortages, the shortage of labour. But I'm not sure that trying to urge people to work from home when the pandemic is still going on is really going to work. However, of course, he's in a tricky position. He can't address any of those larger economic issues without, of course, saying something about his own cabinet ministers, his own chancellor, and his own budget. So he's putting it back onto the people in a sort of David Cameronian big society kind of way.
Certainly is. Matthew, front of The Guardian, and we're being warned that the era of cheap food is over. The warning coming from someone actually who should probably know a thing or two about this, Justin King, former boss at Sainsbury's.
Yeah, Justin King, former boss of Sainsbury's, still on the board of Marks and Spencer, talking about the golden era of food, cheap food being over, and he thinks now in the long term we will be spending more on food. According to this front page of The Guardian, I think 2 out of 5 of us are already having to cut back on food. I mean, this is a massive cost of living crisis. You go to the end of this piece and you'll find that economic experts expect official numbers to be revealed next week, that 9% rise in overall prices will be revealed from April. Bank of England, of course, forecasting by the end of the year that it will reach 10%. This was unthinkable a couple of years ago, but of course we've got the crisis in Ukraine, we've had the pandemic. Big controversy midweek. Lee Anderson, the Conservative MP for Ashford, he has been saying that the food bank boom has been fueled by people who can't cook properly, who can't budget properly. He says he can make a meal for 30p, and that caused real upset amongst, no doubt, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who rely on food banks. So this story isn't going to go away. We know that energy prices are going to rocket up again in the autumn. We heard about Elsie in that famous interview with Susanna Reid on Good Morning Britain, who rides buses in order to keep warm. People really struggling out there. And while we talk about Partygate, while we talk about Beergate, important though we are, we have to remember that what's actually dominating people's lives is their ability to put food on the table.
Yeah. Badisha, front page of the FT, and according to the Financial Times, Elon Musk is putting the Twitter deal on hold over the number of spam accounts. I'm going to say nonsense. I've never thought this thing was going to go through, and I just think Mr. Musk is looking for an exit strategy.
I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, if you read to the very end of that front page article, you will see an analyst and a strategist saying exactly the same thing and even speculating that Musk will probably walk away from this $1 billion up because he's signed some sort of one of these rich people deals where even if it doesn't work out, you end up much, much richer than you began before. So Musk, who's a total chaos merchant, I think, has now said that, you know what, the deal is off if Twitter can't deal with all of its spam bots. And he says if Twitter can't get rid of his spam bots, then he's going to try to eliminate them or die trying. And I don't think that fighting robots and dying really is any kind of strategy. If you die killed by spam bots, I think that's not a good life plan, but he's going to do it. So immediately, Twitter's share price plummeted by 20%, and then Tesla's share price plummeted by 30%. I think this is all a hilarious game amongst insanely rich people who should be putting their extraordinary wealth somewhere else and not trying to buy up social media accounts peopled by robots.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think Elon Musk, of all people, had enough on his plate trying to be the man to put a man on Mars. But hey, what do I know? Matthew, let's go to the front of the Telegraph. And there are concerns about some of the accession to NATO that's pending.
Yeah, this is a fascinating story. Erdogan, who's a sort of hard man autocrat, some might say actually dictator in some ways in Turkey, he's claiming to be opposed to the possible accession, probable accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO, although the same story says that Erdogan's ambassador to NATO has been positive about their accession. So it may just be a bargaining chip so he can get concessions. But it's such an interesting story more widely than this. I mean, his accusation is that, I mean, it's quite laughable really, but he says that Scandinavian countries are kind of guest houses for terrorist organisations. There is some support for Kurdistan and the Kurds movement within Turkey, I think, from some Scandinavian countries. But the wider issue about Finland in particular joining NATO is this, that Putin and the Kremlin, one of their false claims about invading Ukraine was this idea of the eastward encroachment of NATO. And yet the perverse reaction by the West, one of the reactions, looks likely to be including Finland in NATO, and that means extending Russia's literal frontier with the alliance by 810 miles, because that is the length of the Finland-Russia border. So Putin is losing this war, or so it seems, on several fronts. It's been an absolute catastrophe for the Kremlin.
Bidisha, your last story, I'm told it's in the Star, but I've got no idea what it is, so take it away.
I don't know why I chose this as my funny. It's about an Alexa Echo bursting into flames in Kidderminster and totally destroying this young kid's bedroom furnishings, toys, bed, and absolutely everything. I think that the key point for me is Amazon, ever quick to retain its customers, simply said sorry and sent a voucher. I mean, it's a long way away from my urban myths when I was growing up, which was that my electric blanket would burst into flames. But no, it's Alexa Echoes now.
Fantastic. Matthew, we haven't got time to squeeze yours in, so bring it back for next hour, because it is my story of the day. Believe me, it's going to be great. Guys, we will see you at 8 o'clock for round number 3. But everyone else, you can stay where you are. Plenty coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. We will, of course, have all the latest, as Russia says it will cut off the electricity it supplies to Finland today in response to Helsinki's plans to join NATO. Russia's deputy foreign minister says that if NATO deploys nuclear forces closer to Russia's borders, Moscow will take appropriate response measures.